You are wrong if you think Overwatch 2 is bad because it's not what was promised in the marketing. You have to judge a game by what it actually is, not what someone told you it would be. Besides, you have to stop falling for marketing. It's meant to hype you up, not to inform you, and you should only be excited about things you are informed about. You're also wrong if you think Overwatch 2 sucks because it no longer gives you incentive to keep playing the game. You shouldn't need rewards between matches to keep wanting to play if the core experience is enjoyable to you. You are also definitely wrong if you think Overwatch 2 is worse than Overwatch 1 because of the gameplay changes they've made. First of all, the game has new content and the old content has been improved. Secondly, 5v5 is superior to 6v6. The myth of tanking being more fun than 6v6 isn't true based on the queue time changes, which objectively show that more people want to play tank now than did before. 5v5 gives more agency to the tanks, it makes supporting more interesting because you have to balance defensive and offensive play, and also is more dynamic for DPS players. You are also wrong if you think Overwatch 2 is bad because it's a hero shooter. Valorant and old Team Fortress 2 are great success stories that prove the genre can work. However, you are correct about one thing. Overwatch 2 isn't good. The real thing killing Overwatch 2 is Blizzard's inability to design around the limitations of the FPS genre and also their inability to design for player versus player gameplay. The first issue affects tanks most harshly because they are meant to act with perfect cognition of where everyone is, what they are doing, and what they are capable of doing. Due to the nature of the tank role, most players will be out of your view, but the game doesn't provide a minimap or any HUD element to inform you about the status of other players. The first-person perspective also doesn't make it easy to stay aware of your close surroundings, which is a problem for the characters most likely to be right in the middle of a teamfight. Overwatch's idea of supports being able to constantly heal their allies actively engaged in combat is inherently incompatible with good-feeling gunplay. Because the amount of healing can range from 0 to more than the amount of damage you can output, attacking enemies will always have inconsistent feedback and be unsatisfying as long as supports are involved. Blizzard seems to believe that as long as each hero has abilities that are fun to use, the game will function well as long as it's balanced. Unfortunately, this is untrue. Abilities are not used in a vacuum, they are used against other players, and the way they affect them and their goals is very important because it can lead to a lot of frustration. It seemed like the dev team was aware of this when they made important improvements to many abilities from Overwatch in the switch to Overwatch 2. However, the lack of interest in fixing the remaining offenders in the game shows that that was a single-time event. Abilities like Sleep Dart, Suzu, Immortality Field, and Genji's Deflect should simply not exist. Overwatch also has issues with needless complexity and inconsistency. Let's take a look at Genji's Deflect ability as an example. It looks exactly like Orisa Javelin Spin visually, but functions differently. Orisa's Javelin Spin deletes the incoming projectiles, which by the way still doesn't make sense visually, but Genji actually redirects incoming attacks forwards to where he's aiming. This ability is pretty frustrating to play against and would be pretty overpowered, so Blizzard came up with a solution. That solution is to give exactly 7 characters in the entire cast the ability to just keep dealing damage as if Genji didn't use any defensive ability at all. Well, okay, that's not actually accurate. Sigma can also knock Genji out of his deflect animation. But how? Well, of course, with a projectile that is the only exemption from the rule that Genji's deflect deflects projectiles. This philosophy of never fixing issues and just adding new mechanics on top of them can be seen with the 3 types of health that are in the game, with the role passives, and recently in the perk system added in Season 15. This is bottom of the barrel game design. It's equivalent to adding base building, survival, crafting, scavenging, and character progression mechanics to a shooter because it doesn't have enjoyable combat. It simply can never work. But even if Overwatch stopped being designed this way, I'm still not convinced the game can be turned around at this point. The division of heroes into tanks, DPSs and supports has never worked for Overwatch, and I can't think of another game that pulled it off in the hero shooter genre. There are also many characters that are just fundamentally bad ideas to have in the game. Unfortunately, you cannot just take those characters out because they have fans and they have skins that were sold for them. You You could try to rework them, but if you change their identity so fundamentally, visual changes will likely be required to follow, which means skins are still obsolete. Blizzard also don't seem to have a good idea of what they want Overwatch to be. After years of developing 5v5, they've started to experiment with 6v6 again? And why is the arcade tab 7 different slots for game modes that get zero support? They even want to give an option to play in third person, but only in one single game mode. I mean, the devs seem absolutely lost.